We've lofted the planks, we've cut them, and now we need to join them. With these planks here, we're going to use scarf joints. When we're joining planks, there's three main types of joint. The first one is the tape joint, which is suitable for very thin ply, but it can be unsightly if you're wanting to get a good finish on your boat. The second is the butt strap. Again, it's very simple, but it can ruin the curve of a plank due to the double thickness of ply and the glue which is holding it together. The third is the scarf joint, which gives by far the best results and is nothing like as difficult as some people would have you believe. First thing we need to do is to mark the scarfing allowance 40 millimeters, which gives us a ratio of 6.5 to 1 for the length of the scarf against the thickness of the wood. To do this, we use this modified tenon gauge. Because you're not simply butting the planks together, scarfing the planks will mean that you have to allow for the length of the scarf when marking and cutting out the plank pieces, as we discussed in the lofting chapter. Doing that little scribble on there where the waste material is means that when we actually cut our scarves, whether it's with a sander, with a plane, or with a router, or however else you want to do it, it means you can actually see where the scrap material is and you're not going to go wrong. The best way to plane scarves is to do 2 or more at a time by clamping them to a bench top with the edge of the lower plank up to the edge of the bench and the next plank on top of the first, but with its edge butting up to the inner scarf line of the lower plank. Use the ply veneers as a guide while you're planing and make sure that your plane is as sharp as you can get it. For most first-time builders, I recommend using a belt sander. It's quick, it's pretty accurate, but you must practice on some scrap ply before going on to your planks. The ply is set up in the same way as for planing. Belt sanding kicks out a lot of dust, so make sure that you use dust protection. Belt sanding your scarves also gives you a free epoxy filler. Once you've cut the scarves, keep the resulting wood dust from the bag for later use. The most accurate and fastest method is to use a router jig. Here we're looking at a simple jig that I've built, which supports the router at the correct angle to cut the plank. When we put the plank in there, we need to make sure that it's lined up. Now you'll need to have run this a few times with some scrap ply to make sure that the jig is correctly aligned. We make sure that it's properly chopped in there, not too forceful, otherwise you'll force the bar up if it's not strong enough. This bit here, this support, lifting the plank, helps force it down at the scarf edge there. Another important point is when you're lining it up here, is don't make a cut right to the very bottom, otherwise it tends to rip out the far corner when you get to the end there. So just bring it up a millimetre or two. And then, after you've cut all of that, you can drop it back down that last millimetre and finish the job off. Scarf cut. Right, having cut our scarf joints, we now need to align the planks ready for gluing. The The first thing that we're going to do is to whack a pin into your baseboard down here. And that is to take the end of the piece of string in which we need a loop. Then we're going to secure the base part of the plank. And what we do there is we use the pinholes that have been cut as part of the kit or that you've put in there from cutting out your own planks. Even with those pins up there, the plank will still wobble around a little bit, so we need to secure it by whacking in a couple of pins on either side of it. And that's now secure. After that, it's important when you're using the string that it goes the same way all the time. I'm using a clockwise turn around the pin here, and it's important that you keep that in mind right the way down. The next step is to put a pin through the holes through the middle of both scarf joints, and then tap it in just enough to hold it reasonably securely, because we're going to be taking that out in a moment. And when we get to the last one here, that again, you go around the same side of it. And then we're just going to move that end panel, keeping the string taut, keeping it against the pin until the string is just kissing the pin through the middle of the scarf joint. We've got it there, we've whacked this one in. That's all aligned there, and just to hold this one securely, same thing as before, a pin on either side. And that is our plank perfectly aligned. Let's go back over this process in graphic form. The first step is to secure the plank to the baseboard. We're starting with the bow section with the outside trailing edge of the scarf towards the stern of the boat. Secure the plank with the pins, then pin both the planks through the hole in the middle of the scarf joint. Line up the reference holes, then secure the aft plank and remove the pin in the scarf hole. If we take the heads off the securing pins, we can then easily remove the aft plank for wetting out, and the pair of planks for the other side of the hull can easily be placed over the pins so that they are all lined up and glued together. Be very careful when you're doing this. Use eye protection and cover this up tightly. Before we start gluing, we need to put some polythene underneath the joint, because epoxy sticks to virtually everything apart from plastic, and that will stop the planks being stuck to the baseboard there or anything else. When we're coming along to glue the scarf joints, you'll notice here that we've got end grain, and that really soaks up epoxy. So it's quite important when you're starting off with this that we wet it out before we actually apply the full glue mixture. When you're holding the epoxy, it's fairly important that you keep it stirring the whole time. Keep it mobile so it doesn't set. To make sure that the holes fill as well, because they can be a pain afterwards to try and fill if you haven't got them. And more important, make sure you've got plenty on here. If there is an excess, it will squeeze out. If you haven't got enough in there, you're going to end up with a weak joint, with a void, because there's not enough epoxy. Right, flick this back over, and then bring it in and gently push it down. And what we want to see is it just oozing out a little bit.